the region's wild birds through research, education, and rehabilitation, and has served as president of the Mountaineer chapter of the National Audubon Society. She is a member of the International Association of Avian Trainers and Educators. Katie has worked with birds since 1998. Over the last 20 years, she has given educational presentations featuring live raptors, vultures, parrots, and corvids. She is also a columnist for Bird Watchers Digest and has taught writing at West Virginia University, Virginia Tech, and elsewhere. Her first word was bird. So please welcome Katie Fallon.
Yay!
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was for the great introduction and for having me here to give this presentation. And you're right, it is kind of strange to go from the cerulean warbler, you know, sort of a small bird in steep decline, you know, and then switch to writing about vultures, mostly the turkey vulture, which is of course larger, not always thought to be as beautiful as the cerulean warbler, and also increasing, not declining. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen, and hopefully everything works okay. And if it doesn't, just somebody yell at me. So does everybody see my vulture? Very good. Awesome. Okay. And let me just move my little things around. Excellent. All right. So I've been interested in vultures for a long time. I've been working with birds for quite a while, and the first time I met a vulture in real life was probably around 2000 or 2001, and I thought, wow, what an amazing bird this is. Just underappreciated, but they have a really interesting way of just kind of being in the world and looking at people. And I thought someone should write a book about vultures at some point. And I started writing about them, and then I stopped, and I wrote the Cerulean Warbler book. And then I went back to vultures, and I wrote this book about them that came out in 2017, but then it was just reissued in 2020. So the new version came out September of 2020, so it's sort of still warm. It has a new cover and new photographs, some new photographs, but the text is mostly the same. But anyway, that's sort of just a quick background. Other possible titles. So the title is Vulture, the Private Life of an Unloved Bird. Other possible titles were Vulture, Eat Your Heart Out, or Vulture, Happy Entrails to You. But we went with Private Life of an Unloved Bird, even though they're not unloved by everybody. This picture here is taken as a picture I took at Boyce Thompson Arboretum State Park, about an hour from Phoenix, Arizona. If any of you have been there birding, it's a really wonderful state park, lots of birds. And they have 2 vulture festivals every year. One is the Welcome Back Buzzards Festival in March, and one is the Bye Bye Buzzards Festival in September. And I've been to both festivals, and they're a lot of fun. An interesting kind of side note about that is where we in the US often use vulture and buzzard interchangeably. In the old world, buzzard is usually used to describe a hawk in the buteo family. So what we would call a red-tailed hawk, somebody from the UK would probably call a red-tailed buzzard. And no one's really sure why here in the US we call vultures buzzards. The best theory I've heard is that when people from Europe came to North America and saw large brownish birds in the sky, they called them buzzards because that's probably what they would have been in Europe. So anyway, So this is what the cover of the new book looks like, and that beautiful creature is a turkey vulture named Boris, and she is a female turkey vulture, even though her name is Boris, but the finder named her Boris before we had DNA sexing done, and there's not a reliable way to tell male from female turkey vultures without a DNA test. So Boris is a girl, but the name stuck. So, and Boris didn't really make it into the text of the book because she was sort of too new, but she's very photogenic. So we were able to get her on the cover of this version. And this here is also Boris. I wish I had a better picture of this presentation, but that my shirt says, "Warning: this person may talk about vultures at any moment." So. And that has sort of been true. I talk about vultures a lot. So these first few slides have a lot of words, but don't worry. Mostly after the first few, there's not as many words. They're mostly pictures. But just the big picture on vultures. 23 species worldwide. 16 in Africa, Asia, and Europe, and 7 in North and South America. They're not that closely related to each other, the New World and the Old World birds, which is sort of interesting. They fill the same, or they do the same job ecologically, but they're not very closely related. Most folks believe that the Old World birds are more closely related to hawks and eagles, and the New World birds are a little bit more mysterious who they're related to. They were always grouped with raptors. Then in the 1990s, they moved them into the Cichania forms, the storks. But then in 2000, in the early 2000s, they moved them back to raptors. So no one is quite sure exactly where they go, but they are with raptors currently. But it's sort of interesting that the two groups are not very closely related together, even though they look a lot alike too. 11 of those 16 African and Eurasian vultures are endangered, 11 of those species, and 8 are considered critically endangered. So they're not doing as well in the Old World as they are here in North and South America. But we do have one critically endangered species, California condor. And if you follow the story of the California condor, you probably know that they were down to 22 individuals in the 1980s. They were all captured. Intensive breeding programs were undertaken, and now we have condors hatching in the wild in California and Arizona. There may have been one in Utah also, but they're doing better, but they are still considered critically endangered. But worldwide, the threats to all vultures are similar. Poisoning is a problem for vultures. It's different kind of poisoning depending on where you are in the world. Here with the California condor, lead poisoning is a big problem. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. In Africa, carbofuran poisoning is a problem. So if a carcass is sometimes laced with poison, not always intended to kill vultures, but sometimes intended to kill vultures, sometimes intended to kill other predators that might bother livestock, but sometimes poachers lace elephant or rhino carcasses so the vultures will land and eat it and die and not kind of fly around in the sky above a poached carcass to alert the authorities where the carcass is. And in Asia, there's a Asian vulture crisis in the 1990s. Populations of 3 or 4 species just plummeted due to poisoning by a veterinary pharmaceutical, diclofenac, which is an NSAID given to a lot of cattle. And there are a lot of cattle in places like India and Nepal. So then if a cow died after being treated with diclofenac, the vultures would feed on the carcass and go into kidney failure and die. And it took years to figure out exactly what was killing the vultures. And now diclofenac is banned, I believe, in India, Pakistan, and Nepal, but it's still out there in other parts of the world. And those vultures are in captive breeding programs now, and hopefully, we'll get them back out doing what they should be doing. And vultures are often persecuted for belief-based reasons. Um, an interesting one in southern Africa, there are some sort of folklore beliefs that um, vulture heads or vulture brains have, if you consume them or smoke them, like in a pipe, smoke vulture brains in a pipe, that might give you some clairvoyant abilities, because vultures sometimes seem to appear over a carcass as if they had a second sight. I don't know if it works. I've not tried that, of course, but it's apparently a fairly significant problem in southern Africa, kind of the black market for vulture parts. So I don't think that's a problem in the US yet, but you never know. So speaking of African birds, these photos, I should say, in this next couple of photos aren't mine. I wish they were. But this is a Lapid-Faced Vulture, very large African vulture species. You can see that very large beak, very strong, much stronger than the beak on, you know, a turkey vulture or even a California condor. This is a big species that, you know, has to come in and open up a big carcass. A lot of the smaller species don't have strong enough beaks to open up, you know, a zebra carcass or something. So you've got to have a, you know, a large, strong bird to come in and do that. And this is a Griffin vulture, which is another large old world vulture species that has a fairly large range. And I think that they're just beautiful with that collar of feathers right around their necks. And this is one of my favorite vulture species, also an old world bird. If anybody knows what this is the bearded vulture. It's also known as the lammergeier, although, and the ossifrage is another name that it had, but bearded vulture is the term that most folks are trying to get everyone to use. This is a bird, you can see what it has in its beak here. That is, it looks like a little hoof, like that's a leg bone of a small hoofed animal. Bearded vultures eat primarily bones. They're one of the last vultures at a carcass because they are eating the bones. They're cleaning up the last pieces. And they will sometimes fly into the air with bones in their beaks and drop the bones onto rocks to break them to get the marrow out, to come down and eat the marrow, which is really fascinating. As far as I know, there's really only, that I know of, there's only one bearded vulture living under human care in the United States, and I think it's at the World Bird Sanctuary in Missouri. But it's a really neat species. I've never seen one in real life. And then coming over to this side of the world, this bird, I mean, look at that face. That's like a really beautiful. Everybody says vultures are ugly, but I mean, that's an amazing bird. That's a king vulture. If you've been to Costa Rica or some other areas in the tropics, you may have seen a king vulture, large vulture, lots of white and some black, and just this amazing, colorful face. That's just a surprisingly beautiful bird. And then our friend, the California condor, which is another really neat looking bird with those spiky feathers, that spiky scarf of feathers and those red eyes, and that, you know, pink face that they can puff up or kind of deflate and puff up, and they can blush. Sometimes their face color changes a little bit. Just a really amazing bird. In North America, we did have more vulture species that were even larger than the California condor. California condor has about a 10-foot wingspan. We had larger vultures than that, but they went extinct kind of at the end of the last ice age, when a lot of our megafauna went extinct. A lot of our, you know, not a lot of our mastodons, all of them. The mastodons and the woolly mammoths and those other really large mammals that would have been eaten by big scavengers went extinct, and a lot of the very big scavengers went with them. Almost the California condor. But the population that was surviving in the 1980s was all along the California coast, where they were eating a lot of whales and other really large marine mammals that would wash ashore. Okay, so coming back to more of this vulture stuff. So worldwide, they're primarily scavengers. Again, even though they're not very closely related, most vulture species have strong stomach acid and a very interesting gut flora with lots of bacteria in it that allows vultures to eat diseases and pathogens, rabies, anthrax, botulism, polio, cholera, really anything that a vulture eats goes through and gets fried by its digestive system and comes out neutral. Their droppings, there aren't usually traces of even the DNA of what they ate in their droppings. So if you need to get rid of a body ever, vultures can help you maybe, but they have a very strong acid and gut flora that allows them to eat these things that would make people sick, but they don't make the vultures sick. They can quickly and efficiently remove carcasses that might contaminate the water, soil, and air, which is important if you think about something that has died of, has botulism, anthrax, botulism toxin, or if there are just a lot of mammalian scavengers around a carcass. Mammals, of course, spread rabies. And that's of course a zoonotic disease that you really don't want to get. When you've got a lot of animals a lot of mammals sharing the same carcass, there's a lot of potential for swapping of saliva and potentially spreading rabies. So vultures can help reduce the concentration of mammalian scavengers too, which is really important. So coming now to my friend, the turkey vulture. Turkey vultures they're the world's most widespread vulture species. So they are, they have the biggest range of any vulture species in the world, but they are, hold on a second, just moving, there we go. But they're probably the most abundant vulture species. However, there's another species of vulture that may be more abundant, maybe more numerous, and that's our American black vulture. Whatever the case, there are a lot of both species. Turkey vultures breed from southern Canada to the tip of Argentina and really almost everywhere in between. They're on islands, they're in the Caribbean islands, the Falkland Islands, they are on coastlines, in the deserts, in the mountains, in the forest. They are live in a wide variety of habitats. They're not often found as close to humans as black vultures are, but their range is just really, really impressive. The global population may be 15 to 20 million turkey vultures. Compare that to cerulean warblers, my other favorite bird. There may only be 300,000 cerulean warblers in the world. So comparing that to 20 million turkey vultures, it's pretty amazing. And there probably are just as many black vultures. There are 6 subspecies of turkey vulture, 3 that breed in North America and 3 that breed in the tropics. And each of those subspecies has a different migratory strategy. Our eastern turkey vultures are considered partial migrants. And you probably have turkey vultures all year where you live. And we have some, I'm in Morgantown, West Virginia. We have a few all year, but we have a lot more in the summer. But in the east, some of the eastern birds may go from places like New England and Pennsylvania, may spend the winter in Virginia, or they might go further all to Florida, but the eastern birds don't go farther than Florida. The western subspecies from the upper west are complete migrants. And this is a really cool map from eBird that shows turkey vulture range. You can see they are really pretty much all over. The places where they aren't are where it's very cold. You'll notice up into northern Canada, that's kind of where they peter out. And then the bottom of South America, they're on the Falklands, but they kind of peter out the bottom of South America. And they're not on those Andean peaks in Chile and Peru. You have Andean condors, perhaps in those areas, but turkey vultures getting out of the cold is pretty important. But if you see that density in the southern US and in Mexico and Central America, that's where they are all year. And then the red, I should mention, in the rest of the US, that's the area where the birds, those subspecies are complete migrants. So the turkey vultures will all leave that upper west in the fall, and they will go to Central and South America. So talk about the turkey vulture. I know you're all birders, so you can identify a turkey vulture, but the bird gets identified gets called an eagle all the time, right? I'm sure you've been out bird watching with people who have said, look at the eagles. And you're like, oh, those are turkey vultures. And no, they're beautiful. They must be eagles. But turkey vultures do fly very, very beautifully. This is one of my favorite quotes. Let us praise the noble turkey vulture. No one envies him. He harms nobody, and he contemplates our little world from a most serene and noble height. And that's from Desert Solitaire. But this is the view we most often see from underneath. You know, the undersides of the wings and tail are light, and they've got a relatively long and thin tail. And I'll show you a black vulture here in a few minutes to compare. But you can remember turkey vultures have silver linings. They're silver all along the bottom. And that can be a very good indication that the thing you're looking at is not an eagle, but a turkey vulture. Up close, they are, you know, again, just a gorgeous little creature. They weigh about 4 pounds, which is kind of a surprise. Even though they've got a 5 to 6 foot wingspan, similar to a bald eagle, they weigh, you know, less than half of what a bald eagle would weigh. And part of that reason is, you know, a bald eagle is picking up things and carrying them away in their talons, and turkey vultures don't carry anything in their talons. Their talons are like chicken feet. So if you look at this bird's feet, you can see they look very much like a chicken foot. They're a large, flat foot. They can grab things in their beaks and drag them. Like if there's roadkill, they can kind of drag it off the road, but they aren't going to swoop down and carry away, you know, the neighbor's cat in their talons, even though people accuse them of that. But they don't carry anything in those feet. Up close, they've got a lot of really cool features. Look at that cutie. This is a bird that came in for rehab at the organization that was mentioned that I work with, the Avian Conservation Center of Appalachia, which is kind of a mouthful. We usually just say ACCA. We rehab all species of native birds, from hummingbirds to eagles. This year we had about 530 individual birds that we admitted to our rehab program, so we were quite busy. This turkey vulture was hit by a car, and happily he's back out in the wild, totally recovered. But I had to take a picture of that gorgeous little face before we released him. You'll notice that they've got this sharp hooked beak that's very good for tearing open carcasses. It's strong, but it's not as strong as that big African vulture I showed you at the beginning. They often have to go into a carcass through through an opening that's already there. But you can use your imagination about that. Or, you know, if the bird was, you know, if the animal was injured in some way, they might have to get into the gut through that opening. They're not great at puncturing really thick hides, but once they get in there, they use that, and they tear chunks off, and they can open their mouths very wide and swallow big chunks. They also use their sense of smell to help them locate their food. You'll notice those prominent nostrils up on top of their nose. There aren't very many species that scientists believe use their sense of smell to find food. Turkey vultures do use sense of smell, and so do the greater and lesser yellow-headed vultures that are closely related to turkey vultures, and they live in the tropics. They look very similar to a turkey vulture, except their skin color is a little bit different on their face, but otherwise they look a lot like a turkey vulture. Interestingly, these little white kind of warty bumps that you see by this bird's eye, I'm not 100% sure what these are. I've heard people make claims about them that I don't think are true. But what I can tell you is that the birds that we have in captivity that live at the ACCA that aren't releasable, like Boris, doesn't have them. So Boris has, look at that, it's a very handsome bird, right? Boris has been living under human care since she's been about a year old, and she has never developed those white bumps under her nose like that. And tropical turkey vultures also don't have those white warts on their faces. So someday I'm going to figure this out. I just haven't figured it out just yet what those are all about. Turkey vultures are considered obligate scavengers. Their diet's carrion, dead animals. There have been a few cases of them eating things that are live, but uh, it's more like the birds walk up to something that is small and can't move and swallow it. So like a fish that is washed up on a beach, that's a small fish that's not dead yet. They might walk over and swallow it, or invertebrates, large insects and stuff like that. And nestling birds, they've documented them occasionally, ground nesting birds that are in a nest walking over and swallowing them if the birds can't move, but they're not equipped to kill anything and carry off and hunt. They're looking really for dead things. However, they do learn where there are reliable sources of carrion. So if there's an area where carcasses are dumped, or an area where things get hit hit on the road, I don't know if they like cheer on the rabbits, but they do learn where carcasses happen, and they will tend to frequent those areas. Farms or ranches where carcasses are disposed of on site, or landfills, they'll tend to hang out around those areas. Speaking of vulture comics, there are a lot. Once you say you like vultures, people will send you a lot of comics. This is one of my favorites. I'm a turkey vulture. Yes, indeed. My head is bare to prevent rotting flesh from adhering to it. Which is, people will say, the bird you love is so ugly, it doesn't have any feathers on its face. And I often say, well, what if it did have feathers on its face and it had, roadkill stuck to its face all day? That would be worse. To keep cool, I poop on my legs and feet. This is an interesting discussion I had with the editor of my book about how to describe this. It's the liquid waste. Turkey vultures have both liquid waste and solid waste, and it's really the liquid waste that they can expel onto their legs on purpose. The theory is that it's to keep them cool, and it is called urohydrosis. We usually call that an accident in my house when my kids do that, but it's I guess it works to regulate body temperature, and it's not something that it's something that some other species do. Some storks do it, other vulture species do it as well. So if this happens to you sometime, you can say it's just urohydrosis. I'm just a little bit warm. My main defense is projectile vomiting, which is another really interesting thing about vultures. When they get threatened, they vomit. It works for a few different reasons. If you're a human and a turkey vulture vomits, I mean, you've probably, unless you're, crazy like me, you probably run away or go, retreat. So it's effective for people. Also, not much eats a turkey vulture, but the babies at a nest are quite vulnerable. If the baby turkey vultures vomit, sometimes a nest predator like a raccoon or a coyote will eat the vomit instead of bothering the baby turkey vulture, which sounds really gross, but I have a beagle, and I'm definitely sure that my beagle would eat turkey vulture vomit, if given the opportunity, and then roll around in it. So it's an interesting defense. They also will sometimes lighten the load. Sometimes if they have to take off in a hurry, they will vomit if they have to do that. So in that case, it's not so much defense as like, I have to get out of here right away. So they throw up before they fly away. But it's a pretty interesting defense mechanism. So speaking of nests where the young turkey vulture, and if that vomit gets like in your car, it's a really bad smell to get out. Turkey vultures, speaking of nesting, they nest in caves, cliffs, abandoned structures, a wide variety of different structures, attics, haylofts, deer hunting tree stands, really big hollow trees. They've even documented them nesting in abandoned cars and junkyards. That was a cave. This is a hayloft. You can see that there are some piles of vomit on the lower right hand of the screen there. That's vomit in my general direction. But the turkey vultures don't build a real nest. If you remember, I said they can't carry anything in their feet. They can't carry sticks or something back, so they will just use a ledge or a structure or a hollow tree or something they can get in. They might move a little bit of stuff around, but they don't build any sort of nests. So these two babies are just wandering around in a hayloft in Western Pennsylvania. They had kind of the run of the hayloft. This man wasn't using this barn for anything, and he really likes that the turkey vultures come and nest there. So I'll tell you what we're doing up here in a second. Oh, okay. I like it when I make notes for myself that everyone can see to remind you what I've forgotten to say. 2 eggs. They have 2 eggs once a year. They don't have more than that. They might have 1 baby, but it's usually almost always 2 eggs in a nest. Both parents incubate equally, and they will switch off, like 2 ships passing in the night, right? They will sometimes take over. One will go fly away and find food. The other one will incubate. The eggs hatch after about a month, but then they're in the nest for quite a while. The young don't leave the nest until they're about 60 days old. A lot of species leave the nest quicker than that. A lot of our hawks will leave the nest after just over a month. So turkey vultures are in the nest for a long time. They still will hang out around the nest for another few weeks, but they will eventually, when they're 84 days old or so, they will leave the nest for a communal roost. So that would be in the early fall. Usually they would be in a communal roost, and that's when everyone goes, oh my God, the turkey vultures are taking over. Where have they all come from? They're all behind my house. We have to set off our pyrotechnics. So, but it's often the babies are, leaving the nest in the early fall, and then everybody's kind of getting ready to slowly migrate or not. So up close, this is a baby turkey vulture. You'll notice there are some significant differences between this face and the face of the adult from a few slides ago. They don't get that red head until they're about a year old. So it can be a little bit challenging to tell a baby turkey vulture from a black vulture, unless you look closely. But when they're about a year old, they'll start to get that red face, and their end of their beak will turn white also. Someone at a presentation told me that they thought this looked like Bernie Sanders, and now I can't unsee it. Every time I use this. Baby turkey vultures also will have white down feathers, which is also kind of interesting. Again, baby black vultures and baby turkey vultures look very, very similar, but baby black vultures will have tan down feathers, and baby turkey vultures have white down feathers. So if you find baby vultures in your barn or something and you aren't sure what they are, that the color of the down feathers can tell you what you have. So we are going into these turkey vulture nests as part of a research project. A partnership between ACCA, my small organization, USGS, Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, West Virginia University, to take blood samples from the babies just to check for lead in the blood, and also to put wing tags on the birds and take measurements. And you can see that this is a baby in a baby scale. And behind the bird is our lead care kit. So we can take a blood sample in the field, and it just takes a few minutes to run the lead, and we can see how much lead is in the baby turkey vulture's blood. I just have this slide here to show you how happy everyone is to work with turkey vultures. The birds are only out of the nest for about 15 minutes. We don't even usually see the parents. We take a blood sample, take the measurements. If the babies are old enough, we put a wing tag on them, and we get them back in the nest before we don't even see the parents at all. So if you are interested in hearing about lead toxicity, and there could be a whole presentation just on lead poisoning. It's a big problem for the California condor. If they eat enough lead, they can become very sick and die. Bald eagles, golden eagles, red-tailed hawks, red-shouldered hawks, ravens, crows, all of these scavenging birds can become very sick from lead. They often get lead from eating a gut pile or an animal that's been shot and has little bits of lead fragments in it. It's controversial. Whenever you start talking about like lead and guns, people like yell at you like you're trying to take their guns away. But really, if you think about deer hunting, if you think about a natural system where the big predator comes in, makes a kill, takes what it wants and leaves parts in the field, and then the scavengers come through and eat it. I mean, it really is a natural system. And for a scavenging bird, that gut pile is an amazing feast. Unfortunately, if there are little bits of lead left in the gut pile, the birds can swallow it. And it only takes a piece of lead about the size of a grain of rice to make a bald eagle really sick. Turkey vultures, because they're awesome, I don't really know why they can do this biologically, but they can handle a lot more lead than other species. So turkey vultures it takes a lot of lead to make a turkey vulture sick. So you can look at the amount of lead in a turkey vulture, and that can give you a sense of how much lead is out there in the ecosystem. Because a bald eagle eats lead and dies, it only really told you about that. There was one, carcass with lead, where a turkey vulture, measuring the levels of the blood, since they can survive with lead in their system, you get a sense of how much lead is out there, if that makes sense. So if you want to read more about this, there's a paper that came out, Chronic Lead Exposure as Epidemic and Obligate Scavenger Populations in Eastern North America. And that's my husband, Jesse, in that picture was one of the authors. We were able to get about 100 dead turkey vultures and black vultures that were killed as nuisance birds by the USDA. And we were able to look at the lead deposited in bones, and 100% of the birds in the study showed effects of long-term lead exposure. So you can read the paper. If you Google Scholar it, you can find it. There's also a West Virginia Public Radio story about it. Anyway, again, the baby birds are, it's got to be like getting abducted by aliens or something. They're usually, throw up all over us, but don't, sort of half-heartedly try to bite us. But mostly seem like they're not quite sure what's going on. This is, I make my children help. So this is my daughter who's, a young field biologist. This is her proper attire for a field biologist. But she gets very excited to go out and help record the measurements when we are working with the baby birds. This was a recent picture. Obviously, we're in the masks in this picture. So this was just last summer. There were four young turkey vultures that we were able to measure. This particular baby was in Western Pennsylvania. This is the wing tag that we put on the birds. So why do we have to use a wing tag and not a metal leg band? Well, if you remember, turkey vultures expel liquid waste onto their legs. So if you had a metal leg band on the legs of a turkey vulture, the droppings could cake on the metal and corrode the metal or possibly injure the vulture. A wing tag also lets you identify the bird from the ground. So you can just look through your binoculars and see a wing tag, and then you can report it to the Federal Bird Banding Laboratory, and they can tell you about the bird. Also, this was just last year, so we finally have a pickup truck in the background there. Before we had like a Jeep Liberty, and when that vulture smell, when we used to measure the vultures in the back of the Jeep, they would just puke everywhere and it would smell really bad. But now we can just go in the pickup truck and it's a lot less smelly. This is a bird from a few years ago. This is another bird from Western Pennsylvania. And usually when our birds get resighted with the wing tags, it's right around the nest. So, right around where these birds nest, people will report seeing the tagged birds. But this little guy, he was tagged July 10th, 2016, and he was resighted in West Palm Beach, Florida. So, and before it was even a year old. So this is about as far as an eastern turkey vulture will go, as far south as they will go. They won't go further south than Miami. But this is by far the greatest distance that one of our birds has been resighted. And we were able to get in touch with the bird watcher who saw the bird. I, of course, wanted to know if it was at Mar-a-Lago, in West Palm Beach, but the vulture was not. He was at a wildlife management area eating with some other vultures, and the bird watcher said there was nothing remarkable except that it had wing tags. So it had one wing tag. So it was kind of neat that we were able to get that report. This is another turkey. This is the only turkey vulture that I know of from West Virginia who is wearing a transmitter. A lot of the migration data that we know about from mostly from Hawk Mountain putting transmitters on turkey vultures. This is a transmitter that it's usually one that's used on eagles, but we were able to, we had a donor who gave us this transmitter. They usually cost about $4,000. This is a bird that came into rehab and she was shot. And we didn't put a wing tag on this bird because we didn't want to compromise her any further if we were already gonna release her with this transmitter. And there's always, if you're at work in wildlife rehab ever, there's always that, when you release a bird, at least I always wonder, is this bird really going to go out and survive? Am I really doing any good putting all this work into rehabbing these birds? And now, oh no, this one's going to have a transmitter. I'm going to know if she dies. That's going to be upsetting or whatever. But check out what happened. So this bird did not die. The map on the left, the star on the kind of skinny map on the left is where she was released. She was released in September of 2014, and she went down to northern Georgia later in that fall. And then she came back. When she came back, though, the map on the right that's more zoomed in, that's the area where she was originally found. So even though she was released near Morgantown, she went to an area about an hour away where she had been recovered shot. So she sort of exhibited that site fidelity even after being gone for months. And then the following fall, she went back to northern Georgia and then came back to that same area in West Virginia. And you can imagine she's following, if you think about where the Interstate 81 is, and some other big roads through the Shenandoah Valley. I mean, she's just cruising along that Shenandoah Valley. Right over Blacksburg, where I used to live, and over a lot of the, Stanton and Harrisonburg and those other areas where, folks complain about having lots of vultures. Unfortunately, we haven't had any data from this bird since the fall of 2016, but that doesn't necessarily mean she died. The transmitter uses cell phone towers, and apparently AT&T shut down their 2G towers in late 2016, and that I guess our vulture has sort of like an old cell phone, and the transmitter won't work as well. We'd have to recapture her and upgrade the transmitter, and of course we can't recapture her if we can't find her. So she might be out there with their little backpack with the transmitter that's not working. But it clearly didn't slow her down for several years. So hopefully she's still out there somewhere. This is a quick map to show you where the other subspecies of turkey vulture, or one of the other subspecies. This is one of the birds from the Upper West. This is one of the most northern nests that we know of. So Hawk Mountain put a transmitter on the male and the female at the nest site. They nest in an abandoned farmhouse in Saskatchewan. So both the male and the female are wearing transmitters, and they follow almost this exact route every spring and fall. They go down the spring and back in the fall, and they go right through the middle of the country, and they join that big river of raptors over Veracruz, Mexico. And the female spends the winter in Venezuela, right near the Colombian border, but the male usually spends the winter deeper in Colombia. So they're not together during the winter, which is pretty fascinating. But they come back to the same abandoned farmhouse in Saskatchewan, and it's the same pair every year together. Most people believe turkey vultures are, strong pair bonders that will have the same mate every year until one of them dies. But these two have been together since they put the transmitters on in 2007, which is pretty fascinating. And then this is the third North American subspecies. They have a similar migration as the eastern subspecies. They're partially migratory. They're in the desert Southwest. They will go into Mexico and come back into the Southwest. So far, I don't think that any of them from this subspecies that are wearing transmitters have crossed the Panama Canal, but they have gone down that far. So these maps, I could watch these things all day. Watch them move. This is year round. This is turkey vulture movement from eBird data. And you can see where in the summer they're all over, and then whoosh, they all empty out of that upper west, most of the west. We got to watch that one more time because it's so cool. There they go, getting back on their breeding ground, having their babies, and starting to move. And whoop, there they go. They're all gone. Really, I could just watch that over and over. But it's pretty amazing. Here we are, January, this time of year, we're kind of how the map looks now. So I've got to, oh, no, we don't need to watch it again. I have to talk about our friend the black vulture for a couple minutes before I finish up, because this bird has a much worse reputation than the turkey vulture. They're kind of notorious for, all kinds of things like, pulling babies out of their cribs and, taking down full-size deer. Yeah, I'm just kidding. They don't really do those things, but they get blamed for all kinds of stuff. But look at that little face. I mean, that's pretty adorable. This black vulture, this is a bird named Maverick who lives at the ACCA. He's not releasable. He was found in the parking lot of a bar named Mavericks. That's how he got his name. This is a great, not my photograph, but this is a great comparison of when you're looking at black vulture and turkey vulture from underneath. Oh, let me go back there for a second. Black vultures look like they have white hands. Where turkey vultures have that silver lining all along the bottom. The black vulture has a smaller wingspan, does not have white under its tail, it has a black tail. The only white, it looks like they're kind of wearing white gloves. Black vultures, there are a numerous species. There are a lot of them, but if you watch this annual movement, they don't move around as much as turkey vultures. There's a little bit of seasonal movement, but they don't really go too far. They, again, getting out of the cold is even more important for black vultures than it is for turkey vultures. I mean, you can see there are even fewer of them around the Andes Mountains, and there are, even fewer of them up in the northern U.S. But if you watch that again, I mean, you'll notice they are mostly staying around the same areas all year. You also will notice they're not on islands. They aren't in the Caribbean. There's or most of the Caribbean. They're on Trinidad, but that's pretty close to the mainland. There's a theory that they don't like to cross water. I don't know if that's how true it is, but they aren't on those islands where turkey vultures are. Oh, we don't need to watch it again. Sorry. So interestingly, black vultures and turkey vultures too are showing up further and further north than they have been traditionally found. There are a couple theories about why that is. One is that the Earth is getting warmer, the climate's changing, and that's good for black and turkey vultures. It allows them to stay further north. Usually you talk about climate change in birds and it's really depressing and everything's going to die and there's no insects and the birds will all freeze and drop out of the sky and stuff like that. But for vultures, it allows them to stay further north longer. It might even allow them to push further north than they had been before. We've got these great interstate highways now that are fairly new as far, if you think about, time on a bigger scale. If vultures have been around for millions of years, turkey and black vultures, and you've got highways all of a sudden that stay warm and that provide meals for the birds. I mean, that's great. It's like a buffet, these interstates that we try to keep free of snow. And then we hit and kill animals on them, and we provide a great place for vultures to get food and get out of the cold. Black vultures, so again, they're primarily carrion, but they are sometimes reported to kill weak or dying animals, which is where their horrible reputation comes from. It's really tough to know how many of the cases are actually black vultures killing newborn livestock, or what are the cases of black vultures coming upon stillborn livestock and eating them? They like to eat placentas. I mean, who doesn't, right? They're really, there's no hide to get through. They're really easy to eat, and they're really dense. So they're really good for scavengers, and they learn where births happen in the field, and they hang out in those areas. But just like a turkey vulture, black vultures have those chicken feet. So anything, if they're going to kill a weak animal, they're going to run up to it on the ground and peck it. They don't have talons to grab anything. So anything that they're going to eat has to be on the ground, and it has to be unable to get out of the way on its own. So ways to minimize if people are worried about black vultures, because they do look scary if you get a lot of black vultures, even if they aren't planning on attacking livestock. If they can look intimidating, if you're worried about it, trying to put pregnant animals closer to barns or houses, or securing them where there's a lot of activity will help, or humans nearby, or dogs nearby are supposed to help out also. But it's important to remember, black vulture is very similar in weight to a turkey vulture. They weigh about 4 pounds. They're not a very strong bird, but they are smart, and they are social. So they will follow each other to food, and they will hang out together. So this is, we don't need to read all of this, but this is mostly when I give these presentations, people are like, black vultures, they're not from America. They're from somewhere else. They're invading. And I always like to remind people that John James Audubon, in 1827 was putting together Birds of America. And he noted the range of the black vulture was a constant resident in all southern states, extends far up the Mississippi, continues the whole year in Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, even in the state of Ohio, along the Atlantic coast. It's rarely seen further east than Maryland. So they are a little bit north of that now, but they were in these states 200 years ago, but their numbers probably, or definitely, declined greatly due to persecution, and also pesticide use. DDT, we know, negatively impacted black vultures for the same way it negatively impacted bald eagles, peregrine falcons, by weakening the eggshells. So it's possible that people in Kentucky or something, for example, haven't seen black vultures, so think that they're new, and they are maybe new in their lifetime, but they're not new to North America. What we're probably seeing is a little bit of range expansion due to the good things I talked about, like our highways, but it also is the birds, the population may be returning to what it had been, or getting back to what it had been before all of that. You also notice that Audubon notes that hundreds of them are usually found around the slaughterhouses. They alight on the roofs and chimney tops, which is the same thing they do today, right there on all the roofs. They pick nice neighborhoods in Virginia, and they all sit on the roofs. Getting out of the cold is really important for them. So anyway, this is another, they're opportunistic. This is Malaca River State Park in Florida. These black vultures went around to all the grills and checked, like the big predator has come through and prepared its meat, on the grill. So the scavenger comes along and tries to clean up whatever the big predator has left. Black vultures will also eat vegetables, rotten vegetables, pumpkins. If you leave food outside for cats or dogs, black vultures will come and eat it. Someone sent me a picture once of about 20 black vultures on her porch railing, and she said, Katie, I know you like these birds, but do they know something? Am I going to die? And then after a few back and forth, it turned out she was feeding outside cats, and she noticed that the vultures were coming and eating the cat food. So our black vulture likes watermelon. They'll also eat manure. So if there's an open dumpster or something, I mean, they will at McDonald's, like they will go in there and probably eat the French fries. So they're not always just eating carrion. They will clean up kind of whatever, if they're hungry enough, whatever's around. So there's dead mice. So if you don't like to see dead mice, don't look. But this is our Maverick. This is just a quick video to kind of show, he's very curious, I interpret him as being very smart. We have to give this bird a lot of toys to kind of keep him busy, keep his mind working. Our volunteers at the ACCA go to a great extent to design different enrichment for him. And I should add some new videos to this presentation because we have him doing all kinds of stuff now. He does puzzle toys that are made for dogs. He puts his head into all kinds of things to try to get the food that's inside. It's really pretty impressive. And this here, I can't explain this behavior at all. I don't know why this bird does this, but he plays fetch with our volunteers with these plastic ball pit balls. And I don't think it's not just our black vulture who does this, but there are videos of black vultures in the wild playing with like soccer balls left on fields. And they will often, not often, but sometimes kind of tear. If there are, like if you park in an area where there are a lot of black vultures, they might come and pull apart the rubber on your car. Why they do this, I don't think I've heard a good answer. I've heard a bunch of theories, but our black vulture plays fetch with plastic balls. It's clearly not food. Anyway, so kind of getting towards the end of my presentation here. So, I get, most people understand we need vultures. They clean up the environment. They're great, but vultures are sort of scary. This says, wait up, guys. Here it is. Yep, we're good to go. He's an organ donor. And they're especially scary if you see a whole bunch, right, all roosting together. And you think, what are all these vultures doing here? Why do they roost together? And in Virginia, you have a lot more of this than we do, but it's a fairly simple explanation. They roost together for a location. It's got to be good wind, so they don't have to flap very often. There has to be a lot of food, like roadkill, and it has to be pretty warm. So if you have a house that's sited in a warm, windy area by, a lot of place where there's a lot of food for the vultures, that's probably why they're roosting there. They will also follow each other to food, and there have been studies that determine black vultures roost with extended family members. So maybe a pair and then young from previous generations will all kind of roost together. People often email me and say, how do I get these vultures to leave? They're everywhere. And usually I say something sort of flippant like, wait till March. But they, will tend to head south, all roost together, and then they'll kind of disperse when they go to their nests in the spring. So, do vultures attack people? Only if they're dead, right? And then they won't feel anything. So to my knowledge, there haven't been any vulture attacks. The vultures have definitely eaten dead people that have been, gone missing, hikers that have fallen off cliffs and stuff. Vultures will definitely eat them, and there have been cases where the presence of vultures has alerted authorities to dead bodies. But in general, vultures prefer to eat dead herbivores, deer, cattle, vegetarians, things like that. This is just kidding. I can't tell if anyone laughs at my jokes during Zoom presentations. It's sort of weird. I'm like talking to myself and laughing at myself. Anyway, this is one of my daughters. This is Cora, who's actually named after black vultures. The scientific name for a black vulture is Coragyps atratus. And Cora feeds this black vulture pretty often. You notice he's not attacking her or anything. Are vultures waiting for me to die? Probably not. Turkey vultures don't follow dying animals or people. Turkey vultures seem to prefer things that have been dead for about a day, long enough for it to smell, for the carcass to smell so the vultures can find it. That says, for some reason, these new birds didn't seem as interested in Williams birdseed. And they look creepy. People tell me the birds look creepy, but really, I mean, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? And like bald is beautiful. And I think if we can stop thinking of them as creepy, we can, we can recognize them for the ecosystem services that they do. So if you are ever, out in the desert, crawling along, dying of thirst, and you see turkey vultures, they're not following you. You should just keep calm and carry on. Okay, so that's the end here. So I'm happy. I think I kept seeing the little chat alert, but I couldn't really look at them while I was talking. So I don't know if there were questions in there.
Oh, gee, what is that I gotta ask?
In the chat, Katie, most of us were just chatting about your either funny comments or some of the things you said. They weren't questions so much.
Oh, good. Okay.
I do see one that was about the liking for rubber around cars.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm
I
just
had a
trying to see if
question
there's
about
any
that.
other questions typed out. But
I had a question about that. I moved here about just a little over a year ago from New York, and I listened to NPR, and once a month we have this bird guy on. And yesterday, some guy was talking about these black vultures that was eating his the wipers, the rubber off of his wipers. So the bird guide really didn't have an answer, but the questioner had a good idea. He said, I put PVC sleeves over the top of my wipers, and now the birds can't, the black hawks can't get it. The black.
Yeah, I heard a theory once that the only good theory that I have heard about recently is that soy is used in some of the rubber as an ingredient in some of the rubber on wipers and around the moldings of car windows, and it's possible that it tastes good to them. But I haven't heard a great explanation for it, but they do. I mean, our black vulture, I mean, you saw him with the plastic ball pit balls. I mean, he plays with everything. I had a rock in my sandal once while I was in with him, and I took off my sandal to brush off my foot, and he ran over and took my sandal, like a puppy, and he ran around with it and like picked it up and dropped it and picked it up and dropped it. It was like dragging it around his enclosure, and it was, I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing.
We had an ambassador vulture too, and he was really, really smart, and he had toys that he would play with all the time for enrichment. He had coconut bongo drums, and he would play with, I mean, he would get into everything. They're so smart, so inquisitive, and he loved just to make noise and to solve puzzles. I mean, just very, very smart, incredible creatures, incredibly misunderstood. They're some of my favorite birds. I absolutely adore vultures.
Oh, excellent. Me too.
I really do. I really do. Thank you. That was such a wonderful presentation.
Oh, thank you very much for listening to it.
I have an observation. We had an observation here that involved eagles, black vultures, and turkey vultures, which I wanted to tell you about and see if you had any thoughts on it. There was a carcass in our front yard, and there were a bunch of turkey vultures around it. And I noticed that there was usually a dominant vulture that kept the other ones away, but they were all gathered around. And there were some black vultures there too. An eagle showed up, and everybody scattered and went up into the trees around there. And the eagle sat on the carcass and was eating off the carcass. And a black vulture came down and began to hover around the eagle. And when the eagle wasn't looking, when he thought the eagle wasn't looking, it would dash in and try to grab a mouthful. And the eagle would react, and the black vulture would back off, but wouldn't leave. It just hung around. It was very tenacious. In fact, there was a very funny thing I saw one time. The eagle was standing on top of the carcass, and the vulture went behind the eagle and sneaked in and stuck its head in between the eagle's legs and grabbed a mouthful of carcass and before the eagle could react. Anyway, I thought it was very interesting that the black vultures was so tenacious and behaved in that way. When the turkey vultures, they were just very cautious, stayed away.
I've heard similar stories like that where black vultures will, kind of almost work together to sort of distract something like an eagle so other ones can go in and grab a mouthful. I mean, really, an eagle would just, the black vulture is probably pretty lucky while he's sticking his face under the eagle's, talons, that the eagle doesn't decide to grab him, because that would be the end of the black vulture. But black vultures will often displace turkey vultures at carcasses, at least in North America. The turkey vultures will, often back off and let the black vultures will come in and eat first. But in the tropics, it's the reverse. When the big northern turkey vultures from the upper west come down to Venezuela, the resident tropical black vultures are so much smaller that the big kind of gringo turkey vultures can come down and kick off the black vultures off carcasses. So it sort of reverses when you get sometimes in the tropics, which is kind of interesting. But usually eagles, Chase, I saw footage of a game camera once that was on a dead deer. And, there were probably maybe 40 turkey vultures all eating. And then all of a sudden you see all the turkey vultures flew away at once, and then a bald eagle landed, like cleared the room.
Any other questions for Katie? So I have one, Katie, but it's not that hard to answer. When you were talking, I tried to look up that article. Is it open access via ResearchGate, or can you send me a copy?
I can send it to you. The last time I looked it up, I think it was open access, but I can, here's Cora now. I can send it to you if it's not anymore.
Okay, yeah, I looked but it's on Science Direct and something else, but both of those won't give me a PDF of.
Oh no, well I will, I can send you the PDF.
Okay, I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay, all right.
And I appreciate that.
All right, thank you. And Cora, we just talked about how you were named after Black Vulture, and there was a picture of you feeding Maverick. Are you getting ready for bed? Okay, I'm almost done here.
So if there isn't anyone else, let's let Katie leave.
I can't get up.
Thank you so much. I love vultures, and I learned so much tonight, and I appreciate you spending the evening with
Katie.
us.
Oh, is someone talking to me?
Yeah, me.
I can just hear a voice like in the.
All right. So, considering their nostrils, it's like an open space from, each side. So, what happens if they're gnawing at a piece of carcass, and their nose gets stuck, like that hole gets stuffed up? What happens?
Well, I think that they're designed in such a way that they're supposedly they're kind of on top, so they don't get that food and stuff stuck into their in their nostrils. But I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't happen very often, because they would be in trouble. But I think where they are on top of their heads, that they would be a little bit protected. But I don't really know. I don't have a good answer.
Are they able to blow it out or something?
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you can see straight through from one side to the other, like they should have a ring.
You know, you could be gnawing a carcass and, you know, get it all filled up with something, and what do?
Well,
Kleenex.
yes.
Well, we enjoyed your presentation. It was very nice.
Oh, thank you very much.
Informative too, you know. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Mhm. Come back again.
Thank you again, Katie. Thanks everyone for joining us for February. Think about field trips, think about our Sunday walks, think about the winter count, and we will see you next month. Hope everyone is enjoying the new year. Stay safe, and bye-bye.